Wait, you're doing what? I couldn't help but grin as I tried to explain again. I'm getting out, man. I've got my house here under contract, and I picked up 5 acres way up in the mountains of Virginia. I'm getting out of the rat race entirely. But what will you do to make a living? They just couldn't understand my wanting to make a move. It didn't make any sense. These were small town guys like me who had gone to college and then ventured into the big city chasing the American dream. We had nice houses, we had a nice salary, we got to hang out at fancy places. So to them, we had it made. Why would I want to give that up? Well, I tried to explain. I started an online business, and if I can get it going, I'll be able to work right from up there in my mountain property. In the meantime, I can take a job at the local community bank to help bridge the gap. I was trying to explain my rationale, but I don't think it registered. To me, it sounded like a flawless plan, but there was a big lesson I still needed to learn. And that is, you don't know what you don't know. 2 months later, I was standing in a mountain house at the end of a gravel road, watching a black snake crawl up my chimney, slither across the mantle, and drop 6 feet down onto my recliner chair. So I had traded the corporate rat race for a different kind of wildlife entirely. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Phoenician League podcast. I'm your host, Joe Withrow. I'm laying out my background for you in these first several episodes so that you have a feel for where I'm coming from. We'll get into more timely market analysis and economic commentary soon, but I think it's important to make sure that I'm transparent about the experiences that shape my perspective. So, in the first 2 episodes, I shared my experience inside the corporate banking world, Wells Fargo's loss mitigation department and Bank of America's special assets group. In both cases, I was really disgusted by what I saw. My conclusion was that the corporate banking industry was really just a soulless pit of vipers and mercenaries. And granted, I only saw 2 very small corners of the industry, but that was enough for me. I just couldn't stand it. You know, every Sunday evening, I would get this sense of dread about having to face another week on the job. Not only did I not enjoy my work, I was ashamed of it. I felt like I was complicit in something unethical. Now, I had 2 big breaks that helped me make my escape quickly and largely painlessly. The first was thanks to a good decision that I had made. The second was thanks to an accident of financial history. So once I started making a little money, I bought a nice 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom starter home that was right out of foreclosure. It was out on a suburb way out on the edge of the city. So it was in one of the very last areas that had still not been developed at the time. So the home was relatively cheap. I got the house under contract for $110,000. And at first I financed it with a 3.5% down payment and an FHA loan at 6% interest. Then I learned what private mortgage insurance, or PMI, was. It's insurance that you pay to cover the lender, and it covers the lender in case you stop making payments. So it's money out the window from the homeowner's perspective. But PMI is typically required if you buy a house with less than 20% down. So I saved up enough to buy the mortgage down to 20%, by 20%, I should say. Then I refinanced into a conventional loan at 5.5% interest with no PMI. I had also started paying extra towards that mortgage payment each month, and that built up my equity pretty fast, which turned out to be a good move. So then came the accident of history. At the exact moment when I was plotting my escape from the rat race, an outfit called American Homes for Rent was going around snapping up single-family homes using cheap credit. So by being a large real estate investment trust, or a REIT, the company could borrow money very cheaply to buy homes in what it considered to be undervalued areas, right? So it's financing almost at 0% interest rates, because this is right when interest rates, or the Federal Reserve, had dropped their target rate to 0%. So they're snapping these homes up with cash offers. Then they turn around and rent those homes out at a sizable profit margin. All right, so I caught wind of a local realtor who had sold a few homes to this outfit, and I called him up. He came out, he looked at my property, and he determined that it was exactly what American Homes for Rent was looking for. So 2 days later, I had a cash offer of $134,000 on the table. And that's what gave me the money that I needed to put 20% down on my 5-acre property up in the Virginia Highlands. And it's amazing how when you set your mind to something and you think passionately about how you can make it happen, my experience is that the pieces of the puzzle will just kind of fall into place for you. It's almost like magic. The only thing is, I don't think those pieces ever fall exactly how you originally envisioned them. So you have to be wise enough to recognize them for what they are. And that's certainly what happened with my escape from the rat race. I'd made up my mind about walking away from my corporate banking job and getting out of the city, moving out to the country, up to the mountains. I really finalized that decision over the Christmas holiday, but I didn't have a clear path for making it all happen. That's when the pieces of the puzzle fell into place one by one. And I ended up closing on my Virginia property by mid-April. So we're talking 4 months later. It was an absolute whirlwind. Now, this property in Virginia sits at the end of a gravel road. It's tucked deep within the mountains. There's a small babbling creek that kind of flows down the mountain and empties out into the Jackson River, which is itself about 300 yards from the property, as the crow flies anyway. So we're talking very rural. The property itself is about 25 minutes from the nearest town in each direction. And these towns themselves are very small. So the population of this county, it's less than 15,000 people, as last I checked. And that's spread out over a large, rugged geographic area. So there's just not much going on up here. And for that reason, this house had sat vacant for 2 years before we found it. And that's when I learned an old-timey life lesson. All right, when you have a house out in the country that sits empty for a while, it's going to have mice. And if you have mice, you're probably going to have black snakes hunting them at some point. And so I'll never forget, within the first week or two of being in this house, I opened the door to go down the basement, only to see a black snake coming up the stairs. And talk about a surprise, man. And the funny thing is, though, the snake looked just as shocked to see me as I was to see him. So I said goodbye and closed the door real quick. And a few days later, I walked into the living room only to see a snake crawling vertically up the chimney. Right? And I don't know if it was the same snake or not, but I had no idea that snakes could climb straight up. So it climbs up and then it slithers all the way across the mantle. And then it plops down 6 feet onto my recliner chair. Then it slithers down to the floor and across the room and it goes behind the couch. And it paid no attention at all to me. But man, it's such a creepy feeling seeing a snake move like that. It just doesn't seem natural. But I did come to realize that the black snakes are not aggressive. They weren't aggressive towards me. Really, they were just tracking the mice that were living in the house. So I found the old-timey solution, and that is I got a cat. So the cat then took care of the mice, and we haven't seen any snakes in the house ever since. But anyway, I made it to my mountain paradise, but there wasn't too much left of my personal finances because I had to take the money I made from selling my home in the city to put 20% down on the property. So I didn't have a whole lot left, and I had to get to work. So I took a job at the local community bank as a commercial loan officer during the day, and I worked on trying to build out my online business during nights and weekends. I called that business Zenconomics, which I thought was catchy at the time. Now, I had spent several years doing nothing but reading. I would read finance and economics blogs voraciously every day. Then I discovered the financial newsletter industry, and I took out quite a few subscriptions to various investment publications as well. And in the process, I also filled up an entire bookshelf with books on Austrian free market economics, the financial markets, economic history, and I took a big interest in philosophy as well, mainly from the Stoic or the Zen perspective, which I consider those two to be largely the same thing, though I know the purists would disagree with me on that. But anyway, the idea for Zenconomics was to try to put all these pieces together, all these ideas together. And, I had this vision of a comprehensive system that, interweaved finance and investing and economics and philosophy. And that's what I was trying to make Zenconomics. The problem is I didn't know what I was doing. Not at all. So I'd sit up really until midnight, writing posts for the blog. I started writing a monthly newsletter also. And at the same time, I was producing courses related to personal finance and investing, really various investment strategies. And I'd publish those on Udemy. But it was all haphazard. I did not have a consistent business model in place. And I did have quite a bit of success on Udemy. I had thousands of people bought my courses, but I learned something with third-party platforms like that. When you sell courses on Udemy, Udemy takes half the revenue. So I was making a little bit of money, but it wasn't close to a full-time income. And so the online business idea that I was so confident about when I was proclaiming my exit from the rat race to my friends in the city, it wasn't going nearly as well as I thought it would. And that's when it got to in my head that I should write a book. For some reason, I thought selling a book would be easier than selling online finance courses. And I figured the book could help with branding and kind of direct people to my website as well. And I was right about the latter, but I could not have been more wrong about the former. It's really hard to sell a book. Plus, Amazon is worse than Udemy in that it takes more than half of any revenue that comes in from book sales. And that's mainly because the extra is what pays for your printing and shipping costs. So the bubble of my perfect vision started to pop on me. I had this beautiful, calm mountain paradise property, but my business aspirations were not going very well. Plus, my daughter made her first appearance around this time, and I delivered her myself in our home up here in the mountains of Virginia, which was really the pinnacle moment of my life. It was magical, and I don't think anything compares to that. But having a newborn baby also magnified the fact that I wasn't having the business success that I expected to have. And worse, I didn't know what I needed to do to change that. I'd been operating under the motto, if you build it, they will come. That was my mindset, thinking that if I made helpful courses and if I wrote a detailed book, that people would just automatically find them and buy them. But that's not at all how it works, at least not if you're just some guy who nobody's ever heard of before. So naturally, I was a little bit discouraged. And that's when something curious happened that once again changed the direction of my life. I had walked away from one broken system only to discover that building something from scratch required a real-world education. And that's not something you can ever learn in a classroom or in a book. So everything I'll share with you about markets, about money, about how the world actually works from my perspective, the macroeconomic analysis that we do, all that will stem from what I learned from real-world experience, right? That was the next chapter of my journey. And we'll pick it up there in episode 4 next week. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Phoenician League. If you found any value in today's conversation, please subscribe to stay plugged into the network. We put out new episodes every week. And if something we talked about today made you think differently about money or investing, please leave a review and let us know. That helps the show reach the people who could really benefit from it. And remember, financial freedom does not start with money. It starts with understanding and a fiercely independent mindset. So if you would like to dive deeper into the topics we cover, I invite you to get on the Phoenician League email distribution list at PhoenicianLeague.com. We often send out detailed written analysis on the various investment opportunities and the asset classes that we advocate, and we connect the dots across what's actually happening in the global economy. And then we host online strategy sessions periodically as well, where we can really drill into how to take full command of your financial future. So stay connected at PhoenicianLeague.com. And until next time, let's stay smart and let's stay independent. This is Joe Withrow, signing out.